Best known as the guitarist in Jane's Addiction and Red Hot Chili Peppers, as well as his high-profile relationship with Carmen Electra, Dave Navarro would experience trauma at a truly young age, with his mother being murdered when he was just 15 years old. It's a story that could have easily ended with Navarro suffering the same fate as his mother, but he narrowly avoided it not once but twice. Born in 1967 to parents James Navarro and Constance Hopkins, his mother and father would split by 1975, and Dave would live with his mother in Bel-Air after their split. His mother would work as a model, appearing on the game show The Price is Right. It was following her divorce Constance would date a bodybuilder named John Riccardi for about 2.5 years, but after she broke things off with him, he refused to let her go and started stalking her. Former reporter at America's Most Wanted and one-time Howard 100 News host Jon Lieberman would recall he would break into her car and disconnect wires, and when she got into the car and it wouldn't start, he would be standing there hovering over her. Meanwhile, Donna Brandt, a former producer at America's Most Wanted, would reveal Connie was at dinner with some friends and Riccardi just showed up at this restaurant, sat down at the table staring at Connie for like 3 to 5 minutes. He doesn't talk, he just sits and stares at her threateningly. And Riccardi finally gets up, he makes a motion right at Connie's head like he's gonna shoot her. I can kill you anytime I want because you belong to me. It wasn't just Connie who was terrorized initially by Riccardi, as Dave Navarro would admit to Howard Stern in 2001, a week before the murders took place. He was at home when Riccardi broke into his mom's apartment, got violent with him, handcuffed him, and put a gun to his head before letting him go. The guitarist wouldn't report the incident to the police until after his mother was murdered. Dave would tell Howard Stern about Riccardi. Truth be told, I did trust the guy and I was close to him. Tragically, on March 4th, 1983, the guitarist's mother and his aunt Susan Jory were murdered by Riccardi. I want to point out that a lot of the press outlets claimed it was his mother's friend that was murdered the same night, but Navarro himself stated in his 2001 interview with Howard Stern it was his aunt that was murdered the same night. Riccardi would end up breaking into Dave's mother's apartment and shot and killed both women. The guitarist would admit in his same interview with Howard Stern that he could have been murdered that night along with his mom and his aunt, but a change in plans saved his life. The murder would happen on a Thursday night, and he would reveal that he was supposed to be at his mom's apartment that night because him and his father would typically spend every Wednesday together. But that week something came up with his dad, so he rescheduled with his father to Thursday. Dave was just 15 at the time of his mother and aunt's murder, and he knew right away Riccardi was responsible, but he vanished. Dave would reveal to Howard Stern that he was already playing guitar 4 years prior to the murders taking place, and he soon put his energy into music and drugs, admitting to the shock jock he used the murders as an excuse to do drugs and alcohol because it numbed the pain. He would elaborate, telling Dr. Phil, I was 15 years old when that happened, when my mother was killed, and just naturally I started finding myself gravitating towards drinking and smoking weed and the occasional line of coke and some psychedelics. In the same interview, Navarro revealed the emotional toll the murders took on him and his family, saying, the murder basically tore our lives apart. To be honest, you don't know what to do. You don't know where to turn. You don't know how to live, how to trust. It completely throws your emotional stability out of bounds. His mother's killer would eventually be caught 8 years later in 1991 after America's Most Wanted aired a segment on Riccardi, and a tip led the police to him. He would be arrested in Houston, Texas, and the LA Times would publish a story in 1994 that read, FBI agents said that when they caught up with Riccardi, he was living in a stylish Houston condominium filled with cash, jewels, and other evidence of a lucrative burglary trade. Upon hearing the news of Riccardi's arrest, Navarro would tell John Walsh in 2004, I'll never forget the day when they got him. It was an amazing feeling. It was such an amazing sense of joy and anger and hurt and confusion. Riccardi has long maintained his innocence, but in 1994 a superior court convicted him of both murders and he was originally sentenced to death, but in 2012 that sentence was overturned and changed to life in prison. Navarro would testify at his mother's trial, revealing in his book Don't Try This at Home, I had to face the killer in court last year in 1999. I had to take the stand as a witness, and to the left of me were pictures from the crime scene on an effing board. I had to ask for them to be covered. In 2015, the guitarist would release a film called Morning Sun about his mother's murder and the effect it had on him. Not only that, but the film would see him confront his mother and aunt's killer at San Quentin State Prison. While the interaction wasn't allowed to be filmed, he would appear on the Dr. Phil show to talk about the experience, and he would be quoted as saying, "One of the ways in which trauma survivors get past trauma is to walk through the ugliness." Upon meeting Riccardi in jail, he would be quoted as saying, according to cheatsheet.com, "I wanted it to make me feel scorn and anger and rage, and it just didn't. There was no confrontation, no screaming, just an awkward exchange. A lot of things came flooding back, and I was almost watching myself as an outside observer, so it took a minute to get my body and mind and emotional and spiritual stability all back in sync. He's just some old dude dying in jail," he'd recall. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories.